Real stories of werewolves, of Dogman history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Summer Camp Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my Romany aunt, who I'll call Matilda as a personal in-joke, used to always warn me of the werewolf, which was something I didn't believe in at the time. Aunt Matilda was not a superstitious woman. She was as much of a realist as a person could be, and always spoke in a practical, no-nonsense tone. But when the subject of werewolves came up, her voice adopted a mystical and mysterious air, and she'd start to talk a little like a character in some old horror movie. Aunt Matilda had grown up around the Romany, who looked upon werewolves as something more than just dangerous monsters. They viewed them as a source of power and spiritual danger. Although I have Romany blood flowing through my veins as well, I have little to no knowledge of the mysteries. So I'm only describing what I remember seeing happen back then. Aunt Matilda began her lesson on werewolves with a simple warning: stay away from them and never anger them. But when I asked how dangerous werewolves really were, she took on a serious tone and described what could happen if a werewolf were actually successful in attacking a person. To be attacked by a werewolf can result in death, Aunt Matilda told me. But more insidious than that is the fact that if a werewolf kills you, it can drag your soul to hell, and that's an eternity of torment. Aunt Matilda's words were chilling, but she also had a few pointers on how to prevent an attack. The most important thing to remember, she told me, is that werewolves come out at night. So, if it's dark, it's wise to stay close to home and avoid wandering around outside. Stockpile wolfsbane plants around your house, and carry a cross and some holy water to ward them off if you must go out. But Aunt Matilda told me, looking me straight in the eye, that the best protection against the creatures would be to keep my silver pendant around my neck. I told her that I didn't have a silver pendant. And then she gave me a silver St. Christopher pendant to wear around my neck for protection. I promised her I would do that, and I meant it, but mostly just because I thought the pendant was cool. Like I think I said, I didn't really believe in werewolves, so I didn't care about any of the rest of it. Once I had the pendant around my neck, she told me this story, which she claimed was about a necklace pendant just like mine. As I recall, it went something like this. It was a hectic night, and the wind howled through the trees. The full moon was shining brightly in the sky, and its eerie rays shone through the windows of the old farmhouse. Inside the farmhouse, a family was tucked away in their beds, trying to get some sleep. But they weren't alone. Outside, in the shadows of the night, something was lurking. It was the dreaded werewolf, an ancient creature that hunted on the night of the full moon. It had roamed the countryside for centuries, and its presence was feared by all. This werewolf had a fierce canine head, and it walked like a man, towering at least 9 feet tall. Its eyes gleamed a golden yellow in the light of the moon. Long, jagged claws curved from its fingertips, and long fangs jutted from a dog mouth that drooled onto the ground as he walked. The werewolf crept closer and closer to the farmhouse, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It knew that its prey was inside, and it was more than ready to strike. Suddenly the werewolf howled, its cry echoing through the night. The family inside the farmhouse shuddered with fear, and they all huddled together in their parents' bed. The family prayed that the werewolf would pass them by, but luck was not on their side. The werewolf had chosen its prey, and it was not about to leave without them. The oversized upright canine burst through the door and lunged at the family, but instead of attacking them, it stopped, and it bowed its head. It had been sent by the gods, and it was there to protect them. The family stared in wonder at the werewolf, and in that moment, the creature transformed into what looked like a beautiful woman. She smiled at them, and in her hand she held 4 silver necklaces. She told them that they were charms, to keep them safe from all harm. The family thanked the woman for her gifts, and she disappeared into the night. From that day forward, whenever the night of the full moon arrived, the family would put on their silver charms and go to sleep with peace of mind. Nobody doubts that the werewolf continued to prowl, but it was never seen by the family again. The family still wears the silver charms to this day, and they tell the story of the werewolf to their children and their grandchildren. Then Aunt Matilda looked sad and said that since she had no grandchildren of her own, she wanted me to have the medallion to wear around my own neck to serve as a reminder of the power of the gods, and to know that no werewolf could ever come closer than 10 feet to me as long as I had it on. Well, I like that power of the gods part. It made me feel like a superhero or something. But I didn't really care about being protected from werewolves because I was a kid growing up in an apartment in Chicago. And to me, werewolves were fictional movie characters. You might as well protect me from Willy Wonka. That was how I felt in those days. I didn't say that to my aunt though, because I genuinely liked having and wearing the pendant and feeling like I was protected. So it was some years later when I was at summer camp the final year I went to it. I had started going as a kid, but by that point I was an older teenager, like 17 or 18. I must have been 18 now that I do the math, and I was a camp counselor by that point. One night, me and the other people my age put the younger ones to sleep and then wandered out to the lake to have some midnight swimming and smoking where we hoped nobody could see us. At some point we took our outer clothes off and piled them up on rocks near the water. Then we all went for a cooling swim in our bathing suits that we wore under our clothes all summer. I took all my necklaces off because some of them were cheap. All of them except Aunt Matilda's, really. And I thought some of them might get rusty or even fall apart underwater. My protective medallion was left on shore, and I really wasn't even thinking about it. How often had I run into a werewolf while swimming in a lake? I had never run into a werewolf while swimming in a lake or doing anything else. So I joined my co-counselors in the water, and the 6 of us had a blast. For a while. One of the other girls screamed and pointed to land on the other side of the lake, opposite to the side we had entered from. At first I didn't see what she was upset about, but then I noticed a dark, scary form in the bushes. I couldn't tell if it was a man or an animal, but when it saw that it had been noticed, the shadow emerged into enough light that, well, I still couldn't tell if it was a man or an animal, because this was something that appeared to be walking on 2 legs as we humans do, but also seemed to be covered in dark fur like an animal. The head had tall pointed ears up on top, and the teeth were set in a long canine snout. But this guy had big muscle man arms and hands that ended in clawed fingers. It was neither man nor wolf, and yet it was both at the same time. I remember treading water for a few seconds, adding all these details up in my tired teenage stoner brain. And somehow, everything kept adding up to a werewolf. The monster that I didn't believe in, but that my Aunt Matilda kept telling me was real. But I was protected against werewolves, I thought. Instinctively I reached for the medallion around my neck, the silver one, that I had worn since I was a little kid. It wasn't there. Alarm shot through me as I remembered that I had left my necklaces on shore. Suddenly I felt a lot more concerned about that werewolf over there. I turned to look at him again, to gauge how far away he was. But I heard a splash. Even before I could look, now everyone was screaming, as the werewolf was already in the water with us. There was so much foam splashing and flying that I really couldn't see where I was even swimming to. I just trusted that everyone was heading back to their clothes, and that as long as I followed the splashing foam and the screaming, I'd get back to my medallion in time to save my life. I might not have ever believed in that medallion or werewolves before, but those were the only two things I did believe in during those horrible moments of swimming back to the rocky shoreline near our summer camp. I was not the first to get back to the rocks, but I was not the last. I saw this girl named Anna slip on the wet rocks and fall forward hard. She was lucky she didn't break her face, but she was crying anyway because that must have smarted really bad. I grabbed my necklaces and clothes and moved away as carefully as I could with them, not wanting to repeat Anna's mistake on the slippery rocks. When things calmed down and we all regrouped, nobody was sure where the werewolf had gone. It took us a little longer in our terrified stupor to do a head count and realize that one of the other girls named Sandy was missing. None of the boys wanted to go look for her alone, while Anna and I didn't want them leaving us alone. So the three of them walked us back to camp, then doubled back to go look for our lost coworker. Well, Sandy was never found, and that camp never managed to open up again for another season. There were lawsuits and legal cases, and the owners collapsed under the financial pressure. Parents started pulling their kids from the program, and there wasn't enough revenue coming in to fight the court cases, so the summer camp went out of business, and the woods fell back under the full control of the summer camp Dogman. Dogman versus Bigfoot in my pool. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I saw two monsters one summer night when I was sleeping over my cousin Vito's house in eastern Pennsylvania. We were in a small town just a few miles to the northwest of Philadelphia, which is not really supposed to be prime territory for either Dogman or Bigfoot sightings. The event that Vito and I witnessed was one that I failed to film with my Super 8 camera, but it will stay alive in my memory for however much longer God allows me to live among you kind people. If you haven't figured it out by now, my story happened a very long time ago. It was either 1973 or it was 1974, I think. That would have made me and Vito either 13 or 14 years old when this all happened. I was staying over for 2 or 3 weeks that summer, and on this night, Vito's parents had driven a long way off to attend a friend's birthday party or anniversary party or something like that. They weren't going to get back till 3 or 4 in the morning, and there was a chance they might just sleep over at the party, then drive back the following day. Since it was Saturday night, that meant Vito and I could watch the Saturday night scary movies all night. This was before computers and cell phones and so forth, and chiller theater and creature feature movies on TV were the most exciting things that happened in our 13 or 14-year-old lives. We were watching a weird movie about Barbara Steele and a castle. I've never seen that one a second time. I can't recall too much about it. Although we both liked Barbara Steele, neither of us were getting into this movie. We were more interested in monsters than psychological horror or whatever this was. We wanted to see The Mummy or Frankenstein or something like that. Because the movie wasn't holding our interest, but it was creating a creepy vibe and mood, we sort of turned the audio up to listen to the soundtrack and wandered around Vito's parents' house. I forget the details, but they were not exactly the owners of the place, or something like that. It really belonged to some older relative maybe, or possibly the owners had passed away. I can't really recall exactly, it was 50 years ago. My point is that there was a lot of old stuff that belonged to earlier generations all around us in that house. I don't know that the place was haunted, in fact I don't think it was, but it sure looked like it should be. Everything in that house was an antique. It felt like we were on the Dark Shadows TV show. Although the inside of the house dated back a long way, they had an in-ground swimming pool in the back that looked like it was maybe 10 years old at the oldest. That was where Vito and I spent a lot of time that summer, which I remember being a hot one. At one point I was coming back from getting snacks in the kitchen when I looked out the window and I saw something that made me drop what I was holding and run back upstairs. I locked Vito's bedroom door and I turned the sound down on his TV. Then I cautiously led him to the window and silently pointed down to the swimming pool in the backyard. There was something drinking water from the edge of the pool. Something big and brown and down on all fours. I mean really big. Vito took one look, gasped, and said, "Oh, water buffalo." It wasn't a water buffalo, but I couldn't tell him what it was. The brown furry thing was down on all fours and leaning over into the pool to drink water. I was thinking that it might be a large dog. It was the size of a bear, but the fur was not the same as a bear's fur. At least not the bears I had seen when my parents took me to see Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's circus. This fur was longer and darker and more matted and gross looking. When that thing finished drinking, it sort of leaned back and lifted its head up, which was shaped like a dog or wolf head. Vito called it a muscle-bound jackal, which stuck in my head all these years. I didn't know what a jackal looked like, but I just thought it sounded cool, muscle-bound jackal. So the thing sort of howled briefly. Then it did the strangest thing I could ever imagine. This four-legged creature leaned back and sort of tipped itself upright, so that it was now standing up on its hind legs like a man. And once it was back on those hind legs, now towering up in the air, it let loose with an even longer, even louder, even more mournful howl. This wolf howled like he was singing the blues or something. I wondered who a giant beast like that could be howling to. Would his howling attract another creature as large as he was? Would his howling attract something even larger? But as we watched and as I wondered these things, his howl was interrupted as another large figure leaped into view and tackled the wolfman around his midsection. The force of the impact sent both creatures crashing and splashing into the water, a huge wave of which rose out of the pool and fell onto the grass lawn beyond it. When the foam and water settled, we saw two creatures down below, submerged in the water up to their shoulders, facing each other, grimacing and baring their teeth. They glared at each other as though they were old enemies. They did not seem surprised to see each other. But my cousin Vito and I, well, we were pretty freaking surprised to see both of them. At this point, we were scrambling through Vito's closet and his parents' bedroom closet, looking for cameras that might have some film left in them. My Super 8 had no batteries left. We wanted to take a picture or some 8mm film of the creatures fighting in the pool down below, but we were not finding anything that had both film and a flash. In retrospect, the flash wasn't going to help us in that context, but it was the 70s and we were kids, and we didn't really understand any of that yet. After some time of trying to find a camera that was working, but failing in the task, we retreated back to Vito's room to watch the spectacle playing out down below. So there was a lot of splashing and there was a lot of screaming, but there didn't seem to be a lot of connecting between the two of them. It was sort of like Jake Paul versus a 58-year-old Mike Tyson. A lot of fuss, but not too many blows connecting. So the second figure, the one that tackled the dog-headed one, this seemed to be a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It did not have ears up on top of its head, and although it did have a bit of a snout, which it would make longer when hooting and hollering, he did not have the long dog nose and canine fangs of the first one, the buffalo-sized dog that we saw drinking chlorine water from the pool. We were watching an ape-like creature battle something that looked and acted like a werewolf from out of legend. It didn't have clothes on. It wasn't a Lon Chaney kind of werewolf. It was too big for that. But it was a wolf-headed creature that walked like we do. Both of them were too large to be guys in costumes, and both were ripped. I mean like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, overly muscled. They were making it clear they didn't like each other, but they were really not making it very clear what they were going to do about that, other than empty half the pool water out onto the walkway and lawn. But then the werewolf picked up that net thing that was laying by the pool. I forget what they're called, but it's that thing you use to pick leaves and crap out of the water to clean the pool up. this long metal and plastic stick thing with a net at the end of it. And he swings it and whacks the Sasquatch right square on the noggin in the process while he does so. Crack! And that Bigfoot, he started making a sound like a baby crying. I'm not even kidding. He sounded like a crying baby. And the next thing you know, he just sort of disappeared in a flash of light. Like zoot. And then there was only one monster in the pool down below. Nobody believes us with that part of the story, but the Bigfoot did not run away. He sort of lit up bright and then disappeared. Vito and I screamed when we saw this. I mean, it was a shocking thing to see. You would have probably shouted a bit as well. But the thing is, when we made all that noise, that werewolf or dogman, the one still left in the pool down below, the original buffalo-sized animal we had seen drinking from the pool, well, he turned his head. He looked right up at us in our window. That shut us up inside of 1 second, and we found ourselves staring down at the wolfman, who was staring right back up at us. I have nightmares about this moment. It felt like we were standing there forever, literally for all of time. The dogman's eyes looked like they had living flames inside of them. I felt like, by the way it was looking at me, that it was telling me that it had come from hell, and that it wanted to bring someone back home with it. We might still be there staring at that thing's eyes to this day, a half-century later, but the beast broke our stare and began running toward the base of the house. We could hear sounds below, and we both got the impression that the dogman was attempting to scale or climb the outside of the house itself in order to get up at us in Vito's bedroom. We ran out into the hallway and for some reason chose a closet to hide inside of. We heard sounds outside for a long while, but we couldn't tell for sure if the wolfman had gotten into the house or not. For this reason, we stayed inside that closet in the hallway, trying to get some rest in cramped quarters until Vito's wristwatch said it was 6 a.m. When we opened that closet door, I wasn't sure what we were going to see. Did the monster get inside? Did it trash the place? Would it still be inside waiting for us? Well, first peek out into the hallway looked pretty ordinary. When we got up our courage, we checked Vito's room, which was no messier than usual. His window seemed intact and did not look broken into. Heading downstairs, we found the pool really had been half emptied of its water the night before. We had not hallucinated the monster fight. It had to have really happened. And there was some digging over by the base of the house under Vito's window, so I guess the creature had actually tried to get into the house. But instead of climbing up to the window as we had expected him to do, I guess maybe he tried to dig under the house? Well, dogman gonna dog, as they say. Actually, nobody says that. So we did tell people about what happened, but we were both kids who were into monsters. We were kids who were known to fantasize a lot. We knew very little of math or science, yet we knew all about Godzilla and the creature from the Black Lagoon. So our female relatives told us to be quiet about it, while our male relatives humored us, as though we were telling fish stories. Pretty soon after that, Vito and I shifted our interests to girls and women, so we kind of dropped the monster stuff on our own. In those days, ladies didn't want to hear you talking about Bigfoot or Dogman. Maybe they still don't, I wouldn't know. For decades, I didn't want to talk about this because I was trying hard to seem sane and get along in the world. And now I'm old, though, and I just don't care how crazy people might think I am anymore. Maybe I'm just a nutty old boomer like this guy on Facebook called me last week. But I'm a nutty old boomer who once saw a Bigfoot fighting a dogman in my cousin Vito's swimming pool in eastern Pennsylvania. Dogman versus Bigfoot in my hot tub. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I've got a weird story for you about the time I saw two cryptids at the same time. This was way back in the 1990s in northern Michigan. I don't remember exactly where. It was a house I rented as a winter getaway for me and this girl that I'd been seeing. It had a hot tub outside in the snow, and we'd have to run about 20 feet through that snow to get to it, and then the same to get back to the house. Of course, running back to the house, we'd be warm from the hot tub and hardly feeling it, but running from the house through the snow barefoot could be quite invigorating, to say the least. So one night we were getting into our bathing suits to go sit in the hot tub when my girlfriend walked outside, screamed, and ran back inside. She slammed the door behind her and was hyperventilating and finding it impossible to speak words that made any sense to me. After some time, she told me that there was a giant bear in the hot tub, and I was like, holy free holy, you know? So I led her upstairs and we found a window overlooking the hot tub to see what was happening. What we saw was not one bear down there, but two. They seemed to have different colored fur. They were very agitated, and they were standing up on their hind legs. Both of them were making angry sounding noises and raising their clawed paws up in the air. They were on either side of the hot tub, and that seemed to be what they were fighting over. Each of them tried to look bigger and more frightening than the other one. The two began circling the hot tub, each one waiting for the other to make some tactical error. They would bluff charge, then retreat, and neither one was dominating, yet neither one would retreat either. My girlfriend was growing agitated. She kept asking why I wasn't doing something, and I kept saying I was doing something. I was waiting, and I was observing. I asked her to explain to me what we were looking at, and she screamed at me that she didn't know what we were looking at. I was like, exactly. So let me observe what's going on, and then maybe I can understand it. Then maybe if I can comprehend what's happening, I can figure out how to resolve this. I thought I was making sense, but she went right back to screaming at me. I tried to block her out mentally, and I just looked out there at the situation. One of those creatures was like a dog-headed Bigfoot, while the other one just sort of looked like a Bigfoot. They both had fur that was different shades of brown from each other, and they both had clawed hands, as I remember it. One of them had tall dog ears, though, and it made him resemble a werewolf more than a Sasquatch. The other one had a more ape or gorilla-like head, so I call him a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They were so similar in size to each other. I kind of found that the most bizarre part. They were taller than bears, and nothing is supposed to exist that's their size. Yet here we were looking at two of them, as though being 10 or 11 feet tall were the normal way of nature in the late 20th century. It most definitely was and is not. What were the chances of seeing one anomaly like this, let alone two? Years later, I was talking with this native guy who told me I was near a portal on that night. I had to have been, he said. And he said that when you're near a portal, the chances of seeing one cryptid are about the same as seeing 2 or 3 or more. It isn't the same as seeing normal animals. It's a different thing entirely. These are visitors to our reality. At least that's what my native acquaintance insisted to me years after the incident. But back on the night when it was happening, those beasts seemed very real to me. My girlfriend got fed up with me waiting and watching, and she burst out of the back door and into the cold night. Standing there just outside the house, she stamped her foot and demanded the monsters go away and leave us alone. That caused them to stop posturing for each other, to stop trying to scare each other, and they both turned to look at and fixate on my girlfriend. When she realized they had gone silent, and that she had 4 glowing predator eyes focused on her, she got quiet as well, and silently backtracked into the house. She closed the door as gently and quietly as she could, count 1, 2, then bam! Both hairy beastmen charged the back door of the house, and my girlfriend and I ran upstairs insanely. We spent that night listening to the creatures down below, banging on the walls and doors of the house. I kept waiting for the sound of breaking glass, but I never heard it. When we got up with the sun the next morning, we couldn't even find footprints of the creatures in the snow outside, and there was nothing wrecked or destroyed that we could make out. Much of the snow seemed melted much more than it should have been so quickly, but I can't really explain why that would be. At any rate, we cut the rest of our vacation short and went home to spend it in my apartment, taking hot showers together. Sure, it's more cramped than a hot tub, but the shower has one distinct advantage over a hot tub. No cryptids allowed. John Carnagon can do no wrong. You know he got it going on. Please join me in thanking John Carnagon for donating to us using our thanks button located under each of our YouTube videos. John is also a channel member, so he gets to see our secret uncensored Dogman stories, far too wild to run on this channel. Werewolf. In my swimming pool. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a story about a werewolf from when I was a kid. That was before most of you guys were even born, I would imagine. I'm in my 70s and this happened when I was 10 or 11. Probably 11, I think this was 1963. Kennedy was still alive and nobody had yet heard of the Beatles. The whole world was about to change in a big way. But at that moment, it was still a whole lot like the 50s. You could still hear new doo-wop songs on the radio in 62 or 63. I'm not even making that up. It might sound crazy, but the story really starts the Halloween before. No, I didn't see a Dogman that Halloween, but my brother and I saw a Disney movie on TV. A real Disney movie, hosted by Walt himself. It was called Sammy the Way Out Seal. Sammy was not way out by modern standards. He was just basically a seal. The main stars of the film were two young brothers around the age of me and my brother. And in the story, they somehow kidnapped this seal and snuck him home to live in their in-ground cement pond in the backyard. Me and my brother wanted two things from then on. A pet seal, of course, and an in-ground swimming pool. The first request would make our parents grouchy when we brought it up, but the idea about the pool only made our dad grouchy. Mom loved that idea. Dad worked in advertising and he thought maybe he could write it off as a business expense if he had a pool party and invited clients from work. When a neighbor down the block began digging up his yard to put in a pool that spring, Dad's keeping up with the Joneses' DNA kicked in. And bingo bango, we had our own backyard swimming pool by that next summer. Once the water was put in, we started to see a whole lot more wildlife than we had ever seen before. I saw birds come and land on things in the pool, and then they would drink the water. I don't remember if we used chlorine right away. I think that came a little later. I know the phenomenon of the animals gathering to drink like it was a watering hole only happened that first season. Maybe they just didn't know what in-ground pools were yet, I can't say. But I remember seeing birds. I saw a cat. I saw a cat drinking the water one time. And I saw all manner of dogs and coyotes and whatever other kinds of canines we had roaming about in those days. This was a suburb of Milwaukee where my dad worked. But it was a recently built suburb plopped down in the middle of what used to be a woodland, with deer and coyote and some cats that looked like they could take you down, at least back when I was a kid. My dad told us and Mom to stay away from any cats we saw, that they only looked cute, but were actually deadly. He never gave us a similar warning about the large wild dogs that sometimes ran around alone and other times in small packs, like hyenas roaming the Serengeti. I don't know if hyenas really roam the Serengeti. I'm just trying to explain that even though we were as bougie as you could be, not all the local wildlife had yet gotten the memo that this was now an upscale Tony neighborhood. Sometimes people's pets would go missing, never to be seen again. And my brother and I would get excited. We were kids who were bored with the suburbs and the idea of the suburbs. We were to grow up to be loudmouth hippies, and we were already in search of a wilder and more authentic life than the one Mom had planned out for us. So when Fifi, the neighbor's cat, was suddenly gone, you realized you might be next. There might be a man-eating wildcat in the area, or a pack of wolves, maybe even a bear. My brother and I liked being scared. It was better than being bored. We would watch horror movies on TV as often as we were allowed to, and that was what we were into. Monsters. So one night that summer, after the pool had been filled, and my parents started planning parties, I looked out one of the back windows, and I could swear I saw someone swimming in the pool. I had invited a friend over earlier who never showed up, so I thought this might be them. It was getting dark though, so I went out back to tell my friend he had to go home and come back the next day. When I reached the pool, however, I saw it was a dog head coming out of the water. I laughed out loud. The dog was so big that I thought he was a person. To reiterate, while Dad had warned us about local wildcats, he had not technically warned us about the local canines. I loved dogs, so I clapped my hands and invited the dog to come over and play with me. The clapping sound seemed to both annoy and alarm this dog, who turned toward me with angry eyes. It looked like those eyes were lit from inside, like a demon's eyes. Suddenly my brother was at my side. He was saying something about how that wasn't Sammy, the way out seal. When that dog who wasn't Sammy saw the two of us standing there, he seemed to take it as some sort of personal insult, and then he did this thing that I'll never forget, even if I live past noon tomorrow. He stood up, like a man. He planted his feet on the bottom of the pool, and he stood up. Do you get me? Even my dad couldn't stand on the deep side of the pool and breathe air. I don't know how tall that meant this canine guy was, but it meant he was very tall. Me and my brother ran inside, screaming that there was a werewolf man in the pool. My father went out back annoyed, looking around. He came back even angrier, shouting at us kids, saying we splashed water all over the cement. The Dogman had gone. He must have splashed water around when he ran off. The two of us got blamed for this. We weren't allowed to watch The Wonderful World of Color starring Walt Disney for an entire month. My dad was convinced that we only imagined seeing the werewolf in the pool, and that the idea had been put in our head by a movie that he now regarded as a bad influence on the two of us. Namely, Sammy the Way Out Seal. I didn't actually hear the legend of the Dogman for many years after that. I think it was the 80s or 90s, really. But when people started talking about the real werewolves of the Midwest, my brother and I realized that was what we had seen that night when we were kids, swimming in the swimming pool. That troublemaking Dogman got us sent to bed early. We couldn't watch Disney movies for a month because of the werewolf in my swimming pool. Hurricane Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. First of all, I want to say prayers for everyone, any other places being hit by this most recent storm attack from Mother Nature. For me, it brings back sharp memories of another storm that hit back in 1974 when I was a young man. I was stuck down there fleeing the oncoming Hurricane Carmen when I suffered a case of egressus interruptus inflicted upon me by the loup-garou, or the Dogman. I may use the terms loup-garou, Dogman, werewolf, or rougarou interchangeably in this email. I know that each word has its own different specific meaning, and can mean different things to different people from different areas and cultures. In this account, however, I'm using all those words to mean whatever it was that menaced me on that stormy day over 45 years ago. Imagine driving at the northern edge of an incoming hurricane. Imagine watching the waters overflowing the shore on your left and trees being torn apart by the wind on your right as you try to drive your way out of the storm. And then, imagine the tiny 2-lane road you're driving on, suddenly blocked by a soaking wet, mad as hell, 7 or 8 foot tall werewolf. Honestly, I don't remember if it was day or night by that point, but I remember the sky was dark. I suppose the exact time and date could be found by reading the old weather reports from back then. It was early September, I know that much. I had made a delivery all the way down by Chauvin, and since then had been waiting with my pickup truck for a late shipment to take back north. They should have already evacuated, but instead they were still there and behind on their business to boot. It was taking too long for them to get their act together, and I told them I'd have to get my truck out of the path of the storm. After it finished passing through, I'd call them and see about rescheduling my pickup. Delaying this delivery hurt me a lot more than it hurt them, and it set my mind to worrying about finances. I was distracted and concerned as the rain and the wind started blowing all around me. I could feel it pummeling the truck as I drove. I was getting frightened that I might get blown right off the road. I read the next day that the winds hit 120 miles an hour, at least down at Point Au Fer where it touched ground. I was east and north of there, up around Montague or coming up to it soon. In fact, I remember I was on Montague Road. The water running along the left of the road was all choppy, like I'd never seen it before. The brush on the right was flailing around wildly in the wind. Branches and chunks of vegetation were blowing high in the sky all over the place. The telephone poles were rocking a little too freely back and forth in the softening, muddy ground. If those poles carried electrical wires, then any of them coming down might black out an entire area while creating a deadly situation down on the road. For me, to say that I was in a hurry to get out of there would be an understatement. I wanted to drive much faster than I was, but the car felt like it was hydroplaning when I would get up any higher than around 50. That was probably for the best, though, as I would come across a large, hairy, dog-headed troll creature standing there, blocking the road and refusing to allow me to pass. There were no real banks on either side of the 2-lane blacktop. On the left was water sloshing up onto the road, and on my right was a steep embankment of muddy dirt. I had to remain right on that road, but that road ahead was blocked by a very large dog or wolf that stood taller than a bear on its hind legs. Its fur blew madly in the wild storm. Its eyes lit up whenever I would look in them. It was unnerving to see, like this was some alien intelligence or something. I know it's just animal eyeshine, but it makes them look like they're from outer space in my opinion. I mean, this was beyond annoying. This was nightmarish. I was unable to get home because a monster was literally blocking my path. Why was it doing that? Why wasn't it hiding somewhere or running away from the storm itself? It didn't make sense, just like a nightmare never does make sense. That was the most unnerving part. I imagine after I pass away, I'll be met by Mo from the Three Stooges wearing a fake white beard at the gates of heaven. When he asks me how I got there, I want to have an answer ready. If that Dogman had caused me to lose my life on that day in that hurricane, I really don't know what I would have been able to tell Mo. I don't know, Mo. Maybe the Dogman lost his mind. Maybe the Dogman was just, evil? Could that work? I would have understood him hitching a ride in the back of my pickup truck. That would have had clear motivation. I would have been driving him away from the storm. But for that Dogman to prevent me leaving and waste his own time, stuck in a storm he didn't need to be suffering inside of, well, that made no sense to me at all. It was a frustrating moment, but also a terrifying one. What could I do? What would you have done? I couldn't go back where I came from, and I couldn't get past this point. I couldn't get out of the car. That dog-headed beast would have made short work of me. I had nothing to do but sit there and realize that I was in a bad situation. The Dogman, for his part, held his arms wide at either side. He rocked in his little circular space, taking a step or two forward, then to the side, then back, then repeat. He never really advanced or retreated, but he constantly gave the impression that he might do either. It was obvious he was saying that I could not travel past that point, but there was no apparent reason for his insistence on this. I remember when I was looking out at him, so large, so feral, and yet so concerned with traffic, that extra feeling that things had stopped making sense. I was stressed. I was tired. I was nervous. I was afraid of the hurricane. And yet, I was more afraid of this big hairy dog-like monster man dripping wet blocking the road than I was of all the rest of it. He wasn't just regular scary. He was extra scary. And I can't explain it to you either. He was a glowing-eyed, oversized, upright, walking canine. He was just scarier than anything else ever. I could have tried to speed up and drive past him, but his posture made it clear he would use that opportunity to leap on the car. Why this terrified me more than the hurricane, I can't really tell you. I just know that I didn't have the nerve to try to drive past him. His claws looked like they could cut through diamond. I felt a rumble growing from underneath. I thought at first that it might be an earth tremor. It wasn't that, but it was still something familiar. The Dogman looked off in the distance behind me at something. I heard the big horn of a semi, and I knew that someone was driving an oversized vehicle on this teeny tiny little road. Looking back there, I saw his blinding lights coming closer. I heard him frantically honking that horn, and I saw a semi-trailer rig speeding toward us on that wet road at well over the legal speed limit. Not only was he going to run right over the werewolf out my window, but this SOB was so determined to get out of the way of Hurricane Carmen that he was about to plow me over too. I had maybe 20 or 30 feet between me and the Dogman, but I touched that gas pedal just the slightest bit, and I turned that wheel as hard as I could to the right. I didn't care too much about the muddy side of the road anymore. I cared more about getting my truck smashed into from the rear by a huge semi. As soon as my right front tire went off the road, though, I could sense how soft the dirt had become, and I pulled right back up onto the very edge of the road. If I was about to get smashed up from the rear, at least I knew I had pulled over as far as possible. If I went even an inch further, we'd either slide down that hill, or maybe roll over, and then slide down the hill. I had done all I could. I looked around, saw that the Dogman was now alongside my driver's window, but he wasn't paying any attention to me. He was focused on trying to display his ferocity to the oncoming block-long truck and its driver, desperate to get out of Louisiana while he still could. I was an innocent bystander in either case. I closed my eyes, and I thanked God or the universe for letting me live as long as I did. Then, I prepared for it all to end loudly. I looked to my left, and there was the Dogman, his arms held wide, his chest pushed out, roaring in the face of the speeding truck plowing toward him. Then, I saw the truck driving left to right, removing the Dogman entirely from my view. That truck drove by, and by, and by, blowing its deafening horn. When it was done and gone, my car and I were still in one piece. The road was now entirely empty. No Dogman, no dog fur, No spot of blood, nothing that showed that he had ever been there. I watched the water slopping onto the road on the other side, and I heard the trees whipping in the wind on my side. It took some time for me to comprehend that I was alone now in the storm. The truck had gone by and missed me. The Dogman had just disappeared. Had he jumped out of the way at the last second? Had he been hit and thrown into the woods or into the water? Was he plastered into the front end of that semi like Wile E. Coyote in an old Roadrunner cartoon? I'm quite happy to say that I haven't got an answer to any of these questions. I just had such a sense of relief that the Lugaroo was gone. I could now return to driving in a hurricane. I had been feeling sorry for myself, stressed about the weather, worried about money. Then, that stupid Dogman made things so much worse that I almost died. Yet afterward, I was right back in the same situation. Yet I was so grateful to be back in that same situation. The exact same thing I had pitied myself over was now the reason I was happy. My mother used to say, life isn't what happens to you. It's how you decide to think about what happens to you. I used to call her a crazy old bat when she would say that, because she'd only say it to me when I was disappointed or hurt or unhappy in some way. In that moment of relief, though, the old saying came back to me, and in that new context, it made a lot of sense. I may still have been stuck in Hurricane Carmen with 120-mile-per-hour winds, but at least I wasn't stuck in the storm with Hurricane Dogman. We've got another late summer Dogman story for you in a second, but first, please allow me to give a shout out to our newest $10 channel member, Sandra Freeman. Our executive producer is Sandra Freeman, more painterly graced than the Leroy Neiman. She goes by the name of Sandra, wittier than a double entendre. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, Sandra Freeman, for making this episode possible. In return, we share all our perks with her. If you would like to be as cool as Sandra Freeman, just join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or do what Ms. Freeman did and click the join link under this or any of our videos. And now, thanks to our newest $10 executive producer, Sandra Freeman, we are able to jump into our next late summer Dogman story. And this is the one we call The Dogman That Wanted Air Conditioning. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my wife Barb and I found a Dogman staying in our own home. It's an incredible story that I'd like to share with you. First of all, I know it's crazy to buy a vacation home and then go on vacation from your vacation home, but that was the level of decadence the two of us had reached when this story started out. We had moved from New York to go on permanent vacation in a small West Virginia McMansion with 4 acres of woods surrounding it. I suppose due to the land we can't really call it a McMansion, but we do anyhow. Then, my investments paid off to the tune of us deciding to purchase additional property in Florida. It was a good luck story, really, and the two of us were on a roll. Sometimes when you go on a long winning streak, fate starts to get annoyed with you. Whoever or whatever runs the clockwork of the world decides to even things out again by penciling in a little meeting between you and the Dogman. We were only going to be gone for 3 days, so we brought our cat Melba Toast with us and locked the place up. I left the HVAC on to keep the place cool. I like the house to be ice cold when we get home. It's just my thing. We got our business and a little relaxation done in Florida and ended up making it back home a few hours earlier than planned. It was dusk. I remember how beautiful the sky was that night and how happy we both were. Life was sweet and becoming sweeter. We had no idea what was about to happen to us. My wife got the cat, and I grabbed the rest of our luggage, and then we walked around to the back door of the house. It was easier for us to do it that way for boring reasons. As I reached the back door, though, I could see that it was already open. I told Barb to get herself and Melba back in the car and lock the doors. Then call the police, because we had a break-in. I pushed the door open and quietly walked inside, looking around. My heart was pumping hard, and a voice in my head told me I should be in the car with my family waiting for the police to come here and do what I was doing. But this was my home, and I was offended that someone would be in there. Of course, it was icy cold inside since I had left the AC on high. How could I blame someone for wanting to get in out of the heat? I hoped they would turn out to be a reasonable person so that I could forgive them and send them on their way. I hoped they didn't have a weapon, since I had nothing with me. Realizing this, I made a right into the study to grab a poker from the fireplace to defend myself with. Before I was even 2 feet into the room, from behind the door sprang a huge horse of a man. I mean that in both the sense of his large size, as well as in the sense that he was covered in fur. He was actually an animal. Speeding past, he brushed me aside like a brown gorilla brushing off a butterfly. Catching myself before falling, I was able to lean myself back and get a good view of the beast man running away. It was not a horseman as my first impression had told me. It was some kind of a dog-headed caveman, or possibly a werewolf. It had a canine-shaped head and pointed wolf ears up on top. It was brown in places and gray in others, but it was covered everywhere in dog fur. It ran on its hind legs, which resembled human legs mixed with the hind legs of a hound. Its front legs were nearly arms, and the paws at the ends of them were nearly hands, or claws at least. They looked as if they could grab and hold things, although I did not witness that behavior. He slammed one door open by pushing his flattened hand paw into it, and I could see that his paw consisted of short fingers, ending in claws. The dew claw was more properly a thumb, at least in appearance. He ran through that door, turning in the direction of the back door where he had clearly been the one who broke in. I nearly relaxed until I realized he might not be the only one. I heard my wife and cat scream outside, and I could guess what they had just witnessed racing past them. I got out of the house and regrouped with my family in the car to wait for the cops. If there was anyone else in there, let the cops find them. Barb told me she had the cat out and it got its claw stuck in her outfit and screamed, swiping at her face, and that made her scream too. That was the screaming I heard? Then, after telling me that story, she told me about the furry in a werewolf costume that she saw running by. She said it was a really realistic-looking werewolf outfit that she might have thought was real. I asked her why she didn't, and she said, "Honey, everyone knows werewolves aren't real." So that's why she decided it was a furry. A super fast furry. A super fast furry wearing a hot, sweaty furry costume on a hot, humid day in the 90s. I thought this was a real creature, but there's nothing to be gained from disagreeing with Barb. It can only lead to trouble. When the police came, they searched the house and found Barb's weed, which I told her she shouldn't just leave lying around. They let her off with a warning, and we went inside to clean up the mess that the Dogman had left in a few places. I've been told a number of times by absolute strangers that we should have saved the dog hair and poo that we found, a concept which I find comical and nauseating at the same time. It took a month to really get the smell of that animal out of the house. Melba Toast, the cat, would never again sleep in the 2 places that the Dogman had marked as his. We had that back door taken out and replaced with a high-security double-door system, and the Dogman never broke in again. He really shocked me, almost gave me a heart attack, but he didn't attack me when he had me cornered. He chose escape over taking me down, even though I would have been no match for the creature. Because of this, my wife and I were able to resume our lives in a somewhat normal fashion. Things could have turned out so much worse the night when we encountered the Dogman that wanted air conditioning.
Team Dogman for men of the world, and it also looks cute on girls. The hat says Dogman, I'm happy to meet you. But there's no guarantee that Dogman won't eat you. Team Dogman hat, it's the prescription. The link to get your own is in the description.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.